how do we put y'all on game, make sure you remember who we are?
So this was one of the earliest customers who came to us with a problem around metering and usage-based billing. So they were a DevTools company who had gotten a huge amount of traction in the open source segment amongst developers, and they were looking to transition from the open source to a cloud-based model with their monetization primarily being based on usage-based strategies. So in this case, they came to us with a very open-ended problem statement. They knew that they were tracking their users based on the number of session pulses, but beyond that, they had no visibility or thoughts on how do we go about billing their customers based on usage. Although they were convinced that usage-based was the right strategy for their business. The only thing that they had was they were sending raw event data to their web. So that's the only information that they had. But after that, how and what, all of that was open-ended, and they had come to us with this very broad problem statement. So let's just dive into solving their needs, right? So they had these users who was the developers, right? Now developers use their dashboards with pre-built components, and the only thing that they were tracking was this raw pulse information, right? So this was being sent as event data to their own backend. Now this was the only thing that they had, and everything else after this was something they wanted to solve for.
So here, raw pulses, is it tracked at an account level or an individual user level?
Sure. So here, I think they did mention that the raw pulse data was being tracked at an individual user level.
Right. So the developer is not the person of interest here, but the end user who is going to use the dashboard is the person of interest of who is emitting the pulse.
Exactly, right? So the developers, while they create the dashboard, it is the person who's viewing the dashboard and using it, whose pulse information is something that they're tracking and want to also monetize.
So since they are tracking this at the end user level, so do they want the pricing strategy to be tightly tied to the end user as well?
Yes, that was the thought process for them as well, right? So when they said they wanted to use usage-based pricing, they did have a number in mind. For example, they did mention that the price per unit, right, was $0.4 per hour. That's what they wanted to charge on.
Okay, so this means that the pulse should be consolidated at an hourly interval as well, say as a session. So the session duration is probably an hour, and that hour is charged, or hour/session is charged at $0.4 per hour.
Exactly.
So we have to track the sessions of an user and then consolidate it into a metric, and then apply this $0.4 price and generate the revenue metric.
Yeah, you're absolutely right? So they wanted to charge based on the number of hours, which means that you have to convert this pulse data somehow into hours, and for each user separately as well, right? Because there can be multiple users at an organization level.
Got it. So do they just want invoice at the end of the pricing cycle, or are they looking at some metrics that they want to track, analyze these informations as well?
So one other requirement when we probe deeper was, since they are doing usage-based pricing, their customers want to be aware of what is the usage that they are doing over the period of the billing cycle. They don't want to just get surprised at the end of the cycle that this is the number. So they actually want to share near real-time data of what is the consumption patterns for their end users, right? In the form of, say, a graph, an hourly graph, or even a real-time graph.
Got it. Right. So basically, the entire system's input is just the raw pulse, and they are expecting these analytics metrics as an output, both for usage as well as revenue numbers. And the other thing is generating the invoice. So is this invoice supposed to be sent to them, or should we send to a payment processor, or what is the expectation here?
Sure. So they did say that they were planning to use Stripe as their payment gateway. So once you have the number of sessions in number of hours, then you have the pricing. There was one other complexity which we will touch upon, but yeah, they wanted to use Stripe as their primary payment gateway here.
Right. So this means that they have already started onboarding their customers into Stripe. So since we have the integration with Stripe, we can directly pull the customer information from Stripe, and the pulse information can flow directly from their system to us. So these are the two inputs that we require on a real-time basis.
Yeah, so the customer information will flow from Stripe, the pulse information will flow from the customer's backend to us. Yeah, these things are something that you can solve for. But then there's the other aspect when it came to the pricing complexity. While they said that they wanted to do usage-based pricing, they also had a set of existing customers who were on enterprise contracts where they had given number of licenses on a monthly price, right? Like it was a fixed number of licenses at $15 per month. And they did not want those users to be migrated to this pricing model. We only wanted the incremental usage to be accounted for in this pricing model.
Got it. So basically, these user level metrics should be tracked, and for the organizations who already have the license-based contract, those N licenses should be ignored while calculating and computing the price of the pulse or session rather, and the remaining users will be charged on the session basis.
Exactly. Right. So this was the entire complex requirement that they had come to us with.
So now the raw pulse events are received in Togai's event ingestion system. First, we have to convert this into sessions. For this, let us assume they are sending a payload where they have event timestamp as a parameter. So since they have already defined that the pulses should be consolidated into hourly metric, we can generate an idempotency key with the event timestamp and the user ID, and while consolidating these two, we can date trunk and take only the hour timestamp of the event. So this will ensure that no matter how many pulses come for the same user in that hour, we will consider only the first event, and thereby the idempotency of that particular hour and user combination is established. So only one count per hour per user will be considered for metering and pricing. So this solves for the sessions requirement. Now, how do we track these sessions into user level pricing, and how do we generate the revenue? So since they wanted to have an upper cap of number of sessions per user, this upper cap can always change in future. Maybe they give out different types of users, and we have to think of long term and give a forward looking solution. So it is better for us to leverage the customer account hierarchy concept that we have and onboard each end customer, end business rather, as one customer, and each user in that business as account under this customer. So these individual sessions will be tracked at each and every account level, and one of the requirement was to generate analytics on both usage and revenue. We already have account level metrics for usage and revenue, and we also have the ability to group these metrics at a customer level and generate data point. So their analytics requirement is solved for here. And with the fluidity in the ability to configure pricing, we give them the ability to modify the upper cap here at the account level. So what we will now have is the sessions, and those sessions tracked at individual user level, and these sessions can be capped or uncapped at an account level. Now comes the question of handling the grandfather pricing, which is basically when they have onboarded existing enterprise customers who have already purchased in a license-based contract. How do we manage? We can still come back and use the upper cap mechanism that we have set up here. Basically, you can override the price plan at an account level, which is off the bat feature offered by Togai. And for those N licenses that they have already purchased, we can give a $0 pricing for each and every account that they have. So this will ensure that their licensing requirements are also taken, and any new user that they onboard, they will fall into the default pricing, and which is $0.4 per hour. Now all these information are tracked at Togai's level. Therefore, the analytics API, which is the metrics API in Togai system, will provide the information for them to plot the usage and revenue graph. Now comes the invoicing part, right? If we split all these accounts, how do I generate a consolidated invoice? Since we have synced the end customer as a single customer in Togai, we have to sync the invoice at the Stripe at the customer level, for which we can use the invoice groups feature. With this feature, we provide the ability to group one or more accounts into a single entity and generate invoice at this invoice group level rather than the individual account level. This is a special case where all the accounts of this customer should be grouped into this single invoice group. So this simply consolidates all these individual invoices into a single invoice. So at the end of the pricing cycle, we will generate a consolidated invoice, and this will be published to Stripe. And from Stripe, we also listen to the payment update status, right? So this will come back and tag the invoice as paid once done.
So this was the solution that we proposed and went live with. So essentially, what would have taken them 4 to 5 months of effort if they had ended up building it internally and ongoing maintenance costs, they had abstracted it out to us, and we solved this for them and went live within 3 to 4 weeks.